Welcome to the Dish on Health IT, your go-to for insights from the leaders shaping healthcare and health tech. In today's episode, host Tony Schueth, CEO of Point of Care Partners, and guest co-host Seth Joseph, Managing Director of Summit Health and Forbes.com contributor, bring us an insider recap of the 2024 HLTH or Health Conference. They'll explore how key themes like AI, emerging tech innovations, data privacy and security, and interoperability were all presented at the event. They'll offer their reflections on what resonated and why these topics were front and center at Health this year. You'll want to listen in as they give their candid take on the conference atmosphere, the trends sparking the most interest, and their potential impact on healthcare's future. Stay tuned for these valuable insights along with exclusive interviews from industry leaders who share what health means to them and the challenges they foresee for health IT in the coming year.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dish on Health IT, where we invite health IT innovators and catalysts to break down and discuss some of health IT's biggest news and most exciting milestones. We at Point of Care Partners are health IT consultants who work with stakeholders across the healthcare ecosystem and are viewed as independent, objective, and trusted third party. I'm Tony Schueth, CEO of Point of Care Partners, and I'll be your host for this episode. Joining me today is a very special guest, co-host Seth Joseph, Managing Director of Summit Health and contributor to Forbes.com. We're both lucky enough to have been able to attend the health conference in Vegas, and that's what we'll be talking about on this episode. But before we dig into this, Seth, why don't you take a moment to introduce yourself to our listeners?
Thanks, Tony. Well, you pretty much said it. Managing Director of Summit Health Advisors. We're a boutique advisory and consultancy. We do work around go-to-market, commercialization, and business strategy for health technology firms and digital health companies ranging from startup through mature and exited. And we also do some work on the investor side as well. So excited to be here. And as you mentioned, I'm also a contributor to Forbes.com, where I write about the intersection of healthcare, technology, and policy. So health is a great conference to be at.
Especially given all that background. So thanks. And we should probably give an overview of health for the listeners who may not be familiar with it. The health event is a premier healthcare conference that brings together leaders, innovators, and decision makers from across the healthcare ecosystem to explore cutting-edge technologies, fresh innovations, and novel approaches to addressing healthcare challenges. Often contrasted with other major conferences like HIMSS and ViVE, Health is perceived as the go-to event for discovering new breakthroughs and visionary ideas, while HIMSS and ViVE tend to focus more on digging into current technologies or showcasing iterative improvements to existing solutions. Health's emphasis on future forward thinking makes it a unique space for those looking to explore what's next in healthcare innovation, and it also caters to a lot of venture capital investors and those seeking funding. I've attended the last couple of years. It's a big conference, and I find that I'm able to connect with friends in the industry, business prospects, but generally just, to see, a whole team of folks. For us, it's our reason to attend is primarily networking and business development, but I keep my ears open for trends, intelligence on business moves like mergers, acquisitions, layoffs, budget cuts, and things like that. Seth, why don't you talk about why you attend health?
Well, I think you've said it pretty well. I had a friend who said, health is where you raise money for your company. HIMSS is where you sell your product. And JPM is where you sell your company. So, they all have their own sort of niche areas and reasons to attend. I think you said it really well. Health is all about innovation. And so it's an opportunity to go and meet with, 12,000 of your closest friends and colleagues and learn about what they're working on, what's next, what folks are excited about. And I think it's a great conference for all of those reasons. They've got a phenomenal lineup, lots of fantastic speakers, and great focus areas for the conference overall. And then, of course, I think it's a big meeting, and just in terms of, as you said, networking and all of the side conversations that happen.
And you've facilitated a couple of meetings the last few years, haven't you?
I have. I did this year, and I've attended the Health ViVE event. I think they're really well-produced conferences. And in fact, Tony, as we sit here recording today, I think news has just come out that the health conference has been acquired by an investor. I believe it's called Hive. I might be wrong on that, but look it up, HYVE. And so this is clearly, a growth conference and an area where people attend because that is where everybody is going to talk about innovation, new technology, et cetera. And I've been pleased to host to moderate some panels as I did this year. Health really does a phenomenal job of bringing together the right people on stage who have a point of view, who are knowledgeable, and have something to say.
See, those that have already written sort of reviews of health, they missed the breaking news. So this is where you go for breaking news. Not really, but that's okay. It's good to have something like that. So this year, some of the themes and the topics that the different speakers had was artificial intelligence. So AI was a major focus with discussions on applications in healthcare, including predictive analytics, personalized medicine, and improving patient outcomes. Keynote speakers emphasized the potential of AI to revolutionize healthcare delivery and management. Another topic was emerging technologies. The event showcased innovations in health IT, such as quantum computing, which promises to enhance data processing capabilities and accelerate medical research. Digital health, there was a significant attention on digital health solutions, including telemedicine, mobile health apps, and wearable technologies. These tools, as you know, are transforming how patients interact with healthcare providers to manage their health. There's also several topics and several sessions on data security and privacy. Sessions address the importance of safeguarding patient data in an increasingly digital healthcare environment. Experts discuss strategies for ensuring data privacy and compliance with regulations. I guess we've had one or two breaches this year that have sort of shown the light on the importance of this particular topic. And then interoperability, one of the areas that Point of Care Partners focuses on. So the conference also focused on the need for interoperability between different health IT systems and to ensure seamless data exchange and improved care coordination. So all of these themes underscore the critical role of health information technology in advancing healthcare innovation, improving patient care. Seth, did you have anything from these themes or something new on the exhibit floor or in sessions that really struck you, stood out to you?
One of the things that stood out to me was I believe it was a LinkedIn post by Abhinav Shashank of Innovacer. I think he was just getting back from health and he posted his thoughts. And to be honest, I don't recall if they were specific to artificial intelligence or not. But the core, I'd encourage everybody to check out his post. Again, Abhinav Shashank of Innovacer, CEO of Innovacer, one of the success stories in health technology over the past decade. Great company doing really exciting things. And his point was, maybe it's time to take it down a notch in terms of the excitement level. His overall thesis was excitement and exciting ideas. Artificial intelligence may raise capital, but it may not get the job done. Healthcare is really, really hard. And Tony, obviously, you and the entire Point of Care Partners team, I think, not only knows this, but has a deep appreciation for the fact that technology, connectivity, interoperability is exciting in theory, but gosh, it just takes an awful lot to actually move the needle and deliver real value. And that's because healthcare is complex. It's a labor-intensive, knowledge-intensive industry where you're dealing with real human beings. You're dealing with a highly regulated environment, and you're dealing with lives on the line. And when you get those confluence of factors, technology has a role to play, but it generally needs to fit in how people practice medicine and how people interact with healthcare. And so I thought that was a post really worth calling out. Do agree with you in particular around the point of interoperability. There's just, I think, a level of anticipation around, in particular, what TEFCA and HTI2 from ASTP ONC is going to bring, and a lot of sort of, as I said, just uncertainty, but also general enthusiasm around what that's going to start to enable. And then the final thing that, Tony, you didn't mention initially was just the amount of innovation that I saw around, I call it the kind of pharmacy value chain. And that's everything from the things that Blue Shield of California is doing and talked about on stage, to some of the other speakers on stage, particularly I'll call out Josh Flum and LRV Health. And then all of the sort of innovation around pulling the consumer into the process and really empowering the consumer. Heard those types of themes around empowering the consumer from prescriptive, Photon, Doctor First, FDB Vila. And so, without trying to assert that any one of those has the right answer, I think it's exciting to hear the level of investment and innovation being undertaken to pull the consumer into the process, specifically as it relates to prescriptions, pharmacy cost, et cetera, and giving them tools to empower them. So those are some notes I had, and Tony would love to hear your thoughts or reactions as well.
Well, one that really stuck out to me is the Blue Shield of California announcement of their partnership with Salesforce around prior authorization. Seth, as you know, prior authorization is a topic that Point of Care Partners spends a lot of time with. And it's a complex project. And I think you also know, because you've known me for a long time, that I spent a lot of time in that space. I was one of the innovators of prior authorization in the pharmacy realm. And today, we're at the forefront of really sort of automating the prior authorization process on the medical side. It's a complex process, but even more important is the impact that it has not only on the provider, who spends a substantial amount of time, getting prior authorization for the patient, but on the patient, who then, their care is delayed or their medications are delayed because they're getting that prior authorization approval from the payer. And so the ability to sort of increase or improve that process and get that therapy or the procedure done for the patient in a more expeditious manner is something that's really exciting to me. So it was fun to hear that. And it's fun to see Salesforce involved in all that. A lot of times over the years, I don't know if you agree, but a lot of times over the years, we've seen, players come in to healthcare from the outside, and they can make impact, but sometimes what they do instead is they have other players, or they encourage other players to move faster. So it's sort of like, oh, I see a threat. And so other players that are more entrenched, kind of move faster. So I see that as, as exciting and as a huge opportunity, and something that I think we should keep a closer eye on.
Absolutely.
Well, now let's transition a little bit and let's talk about the sentiment of health expressed on LinkedIn. It seems some people really found value, while others questioned the glitz and the glam of the event, saying perhaps there was more style than substance. Frankly, the reactions seemed a little polarized. What's the sentiment you've heard from the people you've talked to or seen on social? What are your reactions to some of the points that were made?
Oh, gosh. I think the points are all fair. And of course, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I expect that, gosh, it'd be interesting to look, but I expect that many of those who are sort of lamenting the glitziness of health are those who might be first-time attendees. And I think that's a very fair point. We worked with a company who attended for the first time in 2022, very long-time industry veterans who had not been to a health event, didn't particularly come from a healthcare innovation background. And I know they were a bit put off by the sights, the sounds, as you put it, the glitziness. On the other hand, I think there's reason to be excited about the opportunities to improve healthcare. And the reality is that's going to come with capital. Capital is going to expect a return. There does need to be some level of excitement around that. Everybody is there to an extent sort of selling their vision of the future, and there's a reason to be excited for that. So I think both sides are fair. I do think it, depends on whether you've attended in the past and where you are probably in life right now. So, Tony, curious about your perspective.
I kind of like it. I mean, it might be sort of myself contrasting the other events that I've been to over the years, but it's fun. There's a lot of energy, and and I like that. I feed off of the energy, especially because I'm from the East Coast, and that's, in Vegas, I'm on West Coast time, and I'm always dragging a little bit just because of that. But I feed off the energy from the event. I like the layout. I like that the booths aren't giant, that they're smaller. I like that there's a lot of meeting spaces, because for me, I guess sometimes, I like to spread myself around. I like to go to some sessions, but I also, really want to meet with folks. And there's a lot of opportunity to do that in private settings, so I really like that. Personally, I like that they have some stars that are there. This year we had Halle Berry and some other folks. I kind of like that. It brings attention to healthcare. It brings some excitement. Too often I think people think that, it's boring. Oh, it's healthcare. And I think I like the glitz, but I also see the other side of the coin, which is, we've got to make progress, let's not get carried away. And you and I, we've been in healthcare our whole careers. So, our clock in terms of how things happen is a little different, I think, than others are. Folks that are new to the industry don't understand why things don't go faster. But for us, hey, we're making progress, especially when it comes, we have to build standards. We know it can take a while to get that done and get it, implemented across all stakeholders. So I like it. I enjoy the event, and I enjoy the glitz and the, sort of energy around health.
Tony, what you just said reminded me of I think it's a Bill Gates saying that we tend to overestimate what we can accomplish in 1 year and underestimate what we can accomplish in 10 years. And I'm just thinking about your comment about how long we've been in industry. And, it's been 2 decades, and we've gone from 100% paper, phone, and fax prescriptions to close to 100% e-prescriptions. Now, in healthcare, maybe it takes 2 decades to overshoot. But you're right, we've seen a lot of progress. And again, hearkening back to Abhinav Shashank's post, it just requires hard work and time to influence change, but it does happen.
Absolutely. Now let's sort of change pace and pivot a little bit, and let's listen to some of the folks I was able to talk to while at Health. I was lucky enough to speak with Bevy Miner, who's an executive vice president at Consensus, Frank Harvey, who's the CEO of SureScripts, Tim Pletcher, who's the CEO of MyHin, Charlie Harp, the CEO of Clinical Architecture, and Brian Anderson, who's the CEO of Chai. We'll listen to some of the clips of them answering some of the core questions I asked each of them and discuss points that they made and add our thoughts to their perspectives. First, let's hear why some of the industry leaders think it's important to attend Health. First up, we'll hear from Brian Anderson, CEO of Chai, before hearing from Charlie and Bevy.
Every effort that I've ever been part of, where we brought together multi-stakeholder groups, the innovation has always started in the private sector side. It's never started when we're looking to build regulations or guidelines, started with the regulators. It started with the innovators helping to inform what the best practices are. And a community where innovators come together from the private sector is the natural place where Chai needs to be founded and grounded in to be able to do the work that we're doing. And, that's why we're here, because this is where the innovators are. This is where that kind of consensus building around what best practices in health AI is going to start. It starts here.
I'm Charlie Harp, and I'm the CEO of Clinical Architecture. Like many health conferences, the health conference allows us to interact with our colleagues and other companies we work with, kind of see there's a lot of new innovative companies here, and be able to reach out and interact with those folks and talk to other people and see what they're doing and where they're going in the coming year.
I'm Bevy Miner. I'm EVP of Healthcare Strategy and Policy for Consensus Cloud Solutions. So health has always been an innovation show. I don't know if it's the 6th or 7th year for health, but I've been coming ever since health first started. And what you're going to see is a lot of amazing healthcare innovation, a lot of startups, a lot of funding. It's not a provider show. It's not about technology that can really make a difference in healthcare. And, I'm sad to say that many of those companies out there that are startups are not going to make it. But the nuggets, the real entrepreneurs that are trying to figure out how we can make a difference in healthcare and come up with some amazing ideas. And as long as they know how to implement them and they understand how to match it to a buyer, they will succeed. So that's one of the things I enjoy about the health.
So Seth, what's your take on some of those comments? They're pretty consistent with what the points we were making earlier, aren't they?
I think so. I think the ideas are remarkably consistent with each other and really speak to the power of network effects. I think the health conference organizers did a fantastic job realizing, I don't recall 6 or 7 years ago, that there was a lack of a place, a forum within the industry to bring together, ideas, capital, and entrepreneurs. And by virtue of, convening a conference where you've got those three kind of central concepts, you wind up bringing together investors and entrepreneurs, people with ideas, and that's going to result in innovation. And as Brian, Charlie, and Bevy all just mentioned, it's a fantastic conference to see others, to network. And they are, as I said, they're there because there are others there. And there needs to be something sort of central that attracts the network. But as you start building that network, building that community, and building momentum, it can be really kind of self-perpetuating. And I think health has done a fantastic job of that. And it certainly sounds like Brian, Charlie, and Bevy got a lot of value out of the conference. What are your thoughts?
I think back to earlier in my career, on a couple of different occasions, I worked for a pharmaceutical company, or at least a company that was owned by pharmaceutical companies. And pharma, every year when they put out their earnings, they have a giant R&D budget. One of my thoughts over the years has been that, healthcare doesn't have this giant R&D budget. What we do, on the health IT side is we rely on these entrepreneurs, these people that are willing to take a risk, that see an opportunity and willing to, take a risk to build something, and investors that are willing to invest in them. And they're able then to grow and address sort of business problems. And then, the broader sort of more entrenched organizations then acquire those solutions. And so it is, an important part of healthcare is, startups and innovators and investors, willing to make a bet and to help these organizations grow. And it's great to see, an event that's focused on bringing those stakeholders together. I mean, you mentioned JPM, and that is an event where you go to sell your company. Like you said, this is an event where you go to get your product, where you get investment in your product. And I think it's a great event, and I'm glad they started pulling this together. And I just enjoy going every year. So we talked about the themes recognized earlier. Let's hear from the folks I interviewed about what they had to say about the health theme that was important to them. Spoiler alert, Gen AI is mentioned almost across the board. So we're going to hear from Tim Pletcher, Charlie Harp, Brian Anderson, and Frank Harvey.
I am Tim Pletcher. I am the founding executive director for the Michigan Health Information Network, called MyHIN, and the CEO for Velatura Public Benefit Corporation. So, there's a lot of innovation happening around AI, but it's embedding AI in things that just need to get smarter and better. And so we're just seeing folks starting to change the dialogue from how do I get data to how I use data, and very creative ways.
I think that, we're in the business of data quality, analytics, interoperability. I think seeing what people are trying to do with artificial intelligence is always interesting, and where that's going. I think looking at all the things that people are doing with devices, things like compounding, some of these specialty compounding pharmacies that focus on a disease like COPD. There's a lot of interesting patterns, because what we're always looking for is, where is data coming from? What state is the data in, and how are people going to use it? And when you look at a lot of these, innovative companies, whether they're doing ambient or they're doing devices, that's all data that's going to be going into the same funnel with all the discrete and unstructured data that we're used to. So it's kind of good to get a feel for what tomorrow's data landscape is going to look like based upon what these guys are thinking about doing.
I haven't been able to get my head too far above the waters of health AI. My sense is that AI is certainly the hot topic, or if not the one of the hot topics. It's not going to be the panacea, though, and I am excited that people are beginning to say, essentially, prove to me that this thing is going to have the value and the promise that we claim it to or hope it to have. Right. So I appreciate that level of skepticism that I'm hearing more of this year than I was last year. Last year, it was all the excitement about generative AI models. Right. Now it's like, okay, generative AI are cool things. We have some specific use cases that we can wrap our hands around. Now let's see if it's actually going to drive value in those things. And how Chai can help, with sober eyes, assess, work with industry to identify where the health system's getting real ROI, where it might not, and how to understand responsible AI in that context. It's going to be, I think, very illuminating for the next year or so for all of us. Because, there's real costs associated with some of these tools. And, the challenge will be identifying where that ROI is.
Frank Harvey, Chief Executive Officer for SureScripts. Well, I think, it continues from last year. Last year was a great conference for us. This year, I think we're seeing many of the same themes. People trying to figure out generative AI and how does it work, right? We firmly believe that longer term, it's going to be more impactful than people suspect. Shorter term, it's probably going to take a little longer than anybody hopes or wishes for generative AI to really have the impact. But again, we continue to pay attention there. We've got our own development team working on AI. We, from the very beginning, have utilized the old AI, if you will, machine learning, from the very first code that was written for SureScripts. But again, that's a theme that continues on with us. Looking at the inventive ways that people are looking at personalized health. I think as we get more and more opportunities, as we become to know more about the human genome and all the impacts and how the different personalized medicine opportunities exist there, I think that's very exciting for us as a company as we imagine the ways, particularly under a new sort of ownership for ourselves, of how we can explore and take opportunities in those areas.
One of my comments, I love what Charlie Harp, said about data. Clinical architecture is in the business of sort of cleaning up data. And if you don't have good data, you're not going to have good AI. So I love that Charlie's there. I love his observations. And I think it's really important to the overall landscape. What are your thoughts?
Loved how those comments all came together. We heard, first about how do I get access to data and move it around, and I think that was from Tim, and then we heard Frank talk about also movement of data and how to analyze data and what people are doing with it. And Tony, in some ways, Brian's comments made me reflect back on the early days of e-prescribing, where there was a thesis about how e-prescribing would create value for patients, first and foremost, for pharmacies, for PBMs, for doctors, and for the healthcare system overall. And, that's proven to absolutely be the case. As we talked about earlier, though, it's taken 2 decades to get there. And look, you and the point of care partners and pharmacies, PBMs, the EHRs, e-prescribing companies, did a tremendous amount of work, and SureScripts as well, NCPDP, early on to identify standards, to do work on the standards, to drive proper implementation, to drive adoption and utilization, and then to optimize over time. This was all really, really hard work. And what just resonated for me about what Brian said is, look, it's almost like, there's been a lot of excitement about generative AI. And I, for one, am pleased that, Brian is around, that he's running Chai, and that we've got, serious-minded organizations who are investing their time and resources in Chai to roll up their sleeves and do the same type of work that, we were a part of 15, 20 years ago for e-prescribing, and that we're seeing that start to play out in AI in healthcare, because the reality is it's going to require, I think, that level of rolling up your sleeves, hard work to identify the right use cases, how you think about applying the technology to specific use cases in specific care settings, and how you unlock real value. But the fact that this is happening, that there's a coalition of stakeholders, in some respects, that was the most uplifting thing I've heard coming out of health, was Brian's comments right there.
Yeah. Well, I agree. And when we talk about AI and we talk about hype, and Brian talked about last year he didn't hear any skepticism. Now he's beginning to hear a little bit. I take that as a positive sign. I always look at new technologies through the Gartner hype scale. So I take it that we're maybe over the top and going down toward the trough of disillusionment. And we both know that once you're past that, that's where the real value starts to come. And then the next hype thing comes along. So, one way to interpret what Brian's comments might be is that we're sort of heading down toward that trough of disillusionment, which again is not a negative. I think it's a positive because it means we're about to hit some really, really valuable stuff. So I thought that was exciting. A great comment. Now let's hear from a couple of folks on what they think will be the biggest challenges over the next year. Specifically, we have Tim Fletcher and Frank Harvey.
So I think in the next year, we're going to see the realization of a lot of the regulations that have come forward. So things like HTI-1 and HTI-2, we're going to have a change of administration. And I think right now there's been a bit of a lull that's occurred as we're coming into it. Regardless of which party takes over going forward, I think we're going to see everybody doubling down on making change happen in the healthcare ecosystem. And that's taking advantage of a lot of those regulations and a lot of the technology requirements like FHIR and consumer access. As a consequence of that, our organization is really preparing to make sure consent is a commodity that's sort of available so that we can kind of build trust into sort of the fabric of the infrastructure. And folks have not yet, with TEFCA, not really crossed the chasm on how we build trust into the infrastructure, especially when we sort of cross different state boundaries. And with sort of sophisticated challenges like reproductive rights, tackling how we do interstate data exchange and how we manage the local state-by-state preferences is going to be a key thing. And that's really the space that we're hoping to bring some predictability to, some stability to, and some infrastructure to help manage.
I think one of the biggest challenges facing healthcare, they're really a solution, but they're also a challenge. If you look at the thousands of point solutions really that are trying to solve little bits of the equation, what we find is a point solution here creates issues upstream and downstream. So they solve one issue but create two or three others. So we think you really have to take a systemic approach to solve these bigger problems. And that's how we're approaching it. You can have point solutions that are included within there, but just trying to load in one point solution here or there, it's tough and it creates issues. So we think we have to do it more holistically, utilizing the SureScripts Network Alliance, which is all of our partner companies that we work together, either through pilots or looking at problems that need to be fixed in the healthcare system and working hand in hand with those partners to solve those things. We can't do any of that by ourselves. It really does take the partnerships of the SureScripts Network Alliance companies coming together, working across, and sometimes competitors working on things together that will help create a better, safer healthcare environment for our patients.
I like, when Tim talks about crossing the chasm, because I came into healthcare in the 90s, and there was a book called Crossing the Chasm. And that book, looked at the technology adoption curve from, on one hand, innovators and early adopters. Then there was a chasm, and the early majority, late majority, and the laggards. And I always look at the world, and especially technology adoption, through that prism. So who am I talking to? Which organization am I talking to? Are they an innovator or an early adopter? Are they early majority, late majority, or laggards? And, I think there's a role for each one of them in healthcare, except possibly the laggards. Well, they bring along everybody. But one of the things that Tim also talked about is regulations. And in my opinion, that's really there for the laggards and they're to get everybody sort of on the same page. So the innovators and early adopters that are doing, innovative things, they, in working with different stakeholders, they might have a business trading partner, but, it's many of the transactions are many to many. So I think regulations are really important ultimately in sort of bringing everybody together. So that was sort of my thoughts. Tim really, really made that point, and it really stood out to me with what Tim said. What about you? What did you kind of take away from their comments?
Two things. One, I agree with you about Tim's comments, and I'll just say his comments about HTI 1, HTI 2, buyer, building trust. It reminds me of one of the core values at my old employer, SureScripts. And the value, as I recall it, was the future is bright. And I very much believe that the question is just, well, how long is it going to take to get to the future? And so I think we need to bear that in mind. But the reality is, I agree with you. I think the future is bright. It does take time, but there's a lot of hard work being put in by serious-minded folks from ONC, but quite frankly, also stakeholders who are involved, folks who are providing feedback on the proposed rules. So very much agree. And the final thing, I'll pick a minor fight with Frank's comments just because he brought up the whole point solution fatigue problem. And while I very much agree with the overall point, it is also a nit of mine because I have yet to meet a CEO or executive or investor who disagrees with that statement, but would be willing to look at themselves or any company in an investor's portfolio and say, oh, I might be guilty of being a point solution too, or having a point solution. Everybody bemoans point solutions in healthcare, but nobody can identify. So, I do agree. And I think the point remains that we're likely to see more consolidation over the next 24 months as larger, more established multi-product companies wind up realizing true advantages and economies of scale and start to snap up some of those smaller, more narrow solutions that are having trouble in the market, having trouble raising capital. And so we're going to see the advent of, you can call them platform companies, you can call them multi-product companies, but larger companies like a SureScripts, and that's just one. I don't want to throw too many names out there. So I think that's something to pay attention to over the coming years.
Yeah, and I saw that at the conference. There were those companies that you're referring to. One of the reasons that they're there is to scout out those emerging technologies, those emerging companies. Maybe because you're right, they're sort of failing for whatever reason, or maybe just because they have a really cool kind of new technology that fits strategically into their offering. So I saw that too. So not only those investors and startups, but then companies that were out there sort of looking for, who could really help to sort of enhance our solution, 1 + 1 = 3 kind of a thing. Saw that as well. So we are kind of at the point now where we're going to be closing. So I'd like to thank my very special guest and co-host, Seth Joseph, and a sincere thank you to all our colleagues who took the time to speak with me at Health. It was a whirlwind, but we survived another Vegas conference, didn't we? If you're a listener, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever platform you use to pick your podcasts, including Healthcare Now Radio. We also post videos in our podcast episodes, sometimes longer versions, on the POCP YouTube channel. And don't forget, Health IT is a dish best served hot.
Is it a challenge to stay on top of interoperability regulations and the flurry of activity with FHIR accelerators? Email us at interoperoutlook@pocp.com to learn more about our new Interoperability Outlook subscription monitoring service.